Southwest Army, not those that enlisted, but the residents of the Southwest Army during World War II. Now, if I had the music Jeopardy, I'd play it for a few seconds. But no, I'll move on. Here we go.
Time's up.
Answer. Here's the answer. You might find it hard to believe, but it's true. In August 1940, the people of Southwest Arm, along with other communities across Newfoundland and Labrador, donated money to help buy. Here it is. Big objective. We're going to go out and buy a Spitfire plane. And we're going to donate that plane to the RAF. Now, when I came across this in the newspaper, I was glued to it. I could not believe that people set that as an objective. I thought we did well with setting an objective out there for the war memorial. But these guys are going to buy a plane to help the war effort overseas. Here's the type of plane that they bought. So it's all set up, ready to go. The Spitfire Fund, it was called, appeared in the Daily News, 1940, in August. And I don't make this stuff up. Here's the newspaper article. And when the first $500 was donated, it was sent into the editor, and it said, we think we should buy a plane. Now, there was a bit of argument, should it be the Spitfire or a plane called the Hurricane? The Spitfire won out. Within the first few days, $5,000 roughly came in. A few days after that, the newspaper published a little thermometer judging how much was coming in. $8,000 at that point. The goal, $30,000, we can buy a plane and send over to the RAF. Now, I want you also to note, you can't read it from the back. Some people up there may read it, but there's a display board back there in the back. To the right of the thermometer, there's a list of names. These names are from Little RCs. You can go back there and find St. Jones's, Hatchet Cove, Queen's Cove. I'm sorry, Ijasco. What happened with Ijasco, the postmistress sent in the donation, but didn't send in the names. So I can't find it. Impossible. But we did donate. It's interesting if you want to, when you, this is over, go back and just look at the list. Eventually we'll put it on our site. Because I couldn't believe, people donate 5 cents, 10 cents, 50 cents. And all of that money came together. They didn't buy one plane. They sent over enough money for 2 planes. Now, of course, the talk today is not about Spitfires. It's about the men who served in the RAF from this area. First group I want to talk about are loggers. These were men who went over as Newfoundland Overseas Forestry Unit as loggers. And they went to become airmen while the Air Force. Now, I'm wearing a badge here to symbolize the forestry unit sent to me by a guy in England as a gift. And that's what symbolized all of the men went over with the loggers. And these loggers, some of them, not all, some of them went and joined the RAF. There were 4 loggers from our area that went over with the Newfoundland Overseas Forestry Unit and joined the Air Force when their 6-month contract expired. Because they were civilian. Contract expires, I'm going to list with the Navy, I'm going to list with the Army, I'm going to list with the Air Force. Some of them said, I'm going home. Okay? Not all of them stayed over. And some of them renewed their contract for up to about 5 years. And this is a symbol for the Air Force. There they are. And then, Josiah Drover. I'll tell you the significance of the number 27 as we go along. The numbers. Elder Dooley, number 40. William Soper, 181. And Liam Dedrage, number 397. I'm going to speak first to Josiah Drover. Here's a photograph that was taken around that time. Okay, he's a good student. Josiah Drover, son of George Drover and Susanna Bishop. His dad served during World War I with the Newfoundland Royal Naval Reserve And here's a photograph of George Drover. Josiah joined the Newfoundland Overseas Forestry Unit and given the number 27. He went with the first draft that left St. John's in December 1939. He was on the first group that went over, the first group, and was on the SS Antonia. Now, again, I don't make this stuff up. There's a ship's manifest with his name on it. That's proof that he was on that particular boat. And if you're wondering what was the boat like, it wasn't a little punt or a little putt-putt. Here's the boat that he went over with. There was about 300 men on board from Newfoundland with that particular boy in December. Josiah Drover, when his contract was up, said, I don't want to go after the forestry again. I'm going to join the Air Force, and he trained as a tail gunner. Now, think about it, a tail gunner. You're going to be in a bubble, looking backwards, all while you're up in that flight. Can't mix in with the crew, can't talk to anyone, is what I understand. Here he is, dressed up in his RAF uniform. And shouldn't have touched that with the plane, but I'll leave it there for now. I want to mention this paragraph from Les Day's book. I read that and it struck me. What was this guy feeling, Josiah? So Les and him was driving up to the train in Goobies, and Les said to him, Josiah, what was it like to be in the war? Well, he said, this is his word. He was a tail gunner in the Battle of Britain. He told me that being in the glass bubble at the end of the plane was lonely and frightening. Place to be, especially when being chased by the enemy. Because you're looking at the enemy coming at you. And that's your responsibility, is to protect the plane on board. Look at the plane. This is an illustration of a plane called a Lancaster bomber. I don't know if it was with the bombers, what type of plane, but it was a tail gunner. This particular plane had 3 gunners. The one in front at least saw what was coming and didn't get car sick type thing. I think about Ern Frost as a child, sitting in the back of Ern Frost and come up there, and all it seems is everything going by. You know? So you can imagine him in the tail of that plane. Now, there's the middle one, and this is where Josiah would have been. Now, I blew up that image. Just think about it. You got a little glass bubble, and that's your world, all while that plane was in the air. Now, Josiah had a brother, Willis. Willis also joined up with the Newfoundland Forestry Unit. He enlisted with the Air Force, the loggers went over. When Willis's contract expired, he didn't join the Air Force, he joined the Navy. Now, I don't know if the family of Josiah is familiar with this, but these 2 brothers appeared in the newspaper. Okay, this is an actual photograph from the newspaper showing both of them 1 year after Willis had joined up. This appeared in the Telegraph. This was the caption. Okay, it said, Ibisco, Trinity Bay. Sons of Susie and the late George Drover. These 2 boys went overseas with the 1st and 2nd Forestry Contingents. Josiah joined the RAF. Willis joined the Royal Navy. Their father went over to the last war and was drowned 5 years later. They also had a stepfather serving in the forestry. And I'm certain family members sitting here know who that is. For a lot of people here, they don't know who that is. Who that person was. The stepfather was John Pebble. And again, you can see, for some of the ones up there, he's wearing forestry band. They were very proud. That was their symbol. In May 1941, Josiah received tragic news that his brother's ship, the HMY, Her Majesty's Yacht 2, the Viva 2, was sunk by a German bomber. Willis's body was never recovered. Now, I want to speak about Elder Gooby. He was from Queens Cove, son of Abraham and Annie White. Among the first contingent, again, of the 300 loggers. The ship crossed the Atlantic without escort, docked at Liverpool in December, so no escort, went across unprotected. But when you got into January, February, March of the following year, they had to have escorts. Germans were targeting boats. His name was also on the ship's manifest. So again, not making this up. Here's his name, here's on the manifest, proving he was on that boat. He was assigned the number 40, and that number tells you what place they were in enlistment. So he was the 40th logger to enlist. I don't know if people there realize it. There was 3,500 loggers. This gentleman was 40. Josiah was 27 to step forward and say, I'll go oversee with the loggers. When his 6-month contract expired, Hellred left Scotland, traveled to England, he enlisted with the Royal Air Force, and that's his number, proving again that he was in the Royal Air Force. He performed the duty of a cook, so unlike Josiah, he wasn't on the planes and that, he was cooking for the boys. This is a picture of Hellred Booby with his uniform on. He met and married a lady in England by the name of Iris Oblin.
I'm told you have to.
I'm diabetic, that's why I'm worried about it. No, my sugars are high for those who want me. He met and married Iris Oblin, who worked at the local bakery. Their daughter-in-law sent me the wedding photograph of Hellred and his wife. And this is a photo taken in front of her parents' home, just after they were married. Hellred and Iris and the family returned to Queens Cove to visit his mom in 1967. Annie had remarried because her husband had passed away, and she remarried to Moses Martin, and some people, of course, are familiar with Moses Martin from the Large Sea. Hellred decided to stay and purchased a home in Queens Cove, and his friend, Josh Scooby, said, don't worry about it, boy, I'll tow her down the road for you. And his daughter-in-law in England sent me this photograph of the house being towed down the road with the bulldozer. Okay? So Hellred had made up his mind he was staying, but his wife said, no, I'm not staying in Queens. Iris did not stay and returned with her children. Here's a photograph of Hellred, taken and published by Dexa Wash. Some people are familiar with that magazine. The issue was November, December, 1986. And some of you can imagine what the cover was like, because Eric Stringer was on the front with his horse. I don't know if you remember that issue, but it was all about Southwest Army. Prized possession of mine, got a lot of history in it. Hellred returned to his family overseas. According to his daughter-in-law in England, she told me that he came back in 1991, hoping to rekindle his relationship with Iris, but he was too late. By the time they got back together, she had passed away. Hellred returned to Queens Cove, passed away several years later, and the Evening Telegram carried his obituary in June 1999, noting he was a World War II RAF veteran, age 81. Now, I believe Wanda's here somewhere. I spotted her at one point. This one gave me the biggest challenge for research. I could not find anyone who knew about this man. I knew he was from Locust Brook, that's where he lived too. But asking people, no, never heard of him. But yet, all information indicates he was from there. So, the search went on, and we eventually got an email from a person, and I'll tell you about that in a little while. He was the son of Reuben Soper, Charity Temple. He was born in Sunnyside, but they moved to Blackbrook, which of course is Noblesbrook, and up there now is a new house got built in the spot a couple of years ago. That's where this gentleman and his mom had moved to. He was working with the pulp and paper industry in Grand Falls when he enlisted. And this photograph was eventually located, and he was identified as one of the people in that particular photograph. And that's a confirmed identification by his daughter in England. She had never seen the photograph, but quickly recognized her dad. He was assigned the number 181, so think of it again. He was the 181 logger to sign up to go overseas. He traveled to St. John by train to Grand Falls, and there was an article in the paper to prove that. He was transported to the SS Antonia and would have recognized Josiah and Eldred, who was on board. His name was among the 300 loggers on the manifest. And again, as I say, I don't make this stuff up. I'll try to confirm it, and here you can see proving that he was on that boat. After his 6-month contract expired, he traveled with Josiah to Blackpool, England, to join the Royal Air Force. Now, if you compare their two numbers, there's 7 numbers in between, proving that they were likely standing in the same lineup and signing up at the same time. Now, unlike some of the other cook, tail gunner, this guy became a flight navigator and responsible with the responsibility for navigating the plane. Another thing, he served in Sri Lanka or Ceylon, and here you can see him dressed in a uniform. This was sent by his daughter in England of her dad. Now remember, this was a guy who couldn't even find a photograph of. So now all of a sudden, we sort of communicate with each other. I could help her with her dad's history. She could help me with war history. He did a number of reconnaissance flights aboard a plane called Catalina, or what we would call the Cancel. And this was in Sri Lanka that he would have done this work. This is an interesting photograph of him sitting on a tortoise. Right? Another photograph of him in Sri Lanka. Now, his daughter Judy communicated with her only last night. I told her what we were going to be doing today. She felt honored. She said her dad would have been so proud that the people in Sowerstar were recognizing her. She explained to me how her parents met. My mom and dad met at a dance at a village hall in Northumberland, England. It could have been a few other locations, but Mom lived in a small village called Itherslaw, so that could have been where they met. Now, this is her words, not me. She said, legend has it that she slapped his hand because he was trying to take something from a plate on the table before the food was to be served. And as she walked off, this is according to his daughter, as he walked off, he turned to his friend and said, I'm going to marry her. Believe it or not. He married, and Catherine, daughter of James and Anna Fortune, on December 1946. He had a daughter named Judy, and here's the photograph of the family. This gentleman you see was born in Sunnyside, raised in Noblesbrook, goes to Grand Falls, goes overseas, and married over there. Now, this is Judy's words again, his daughter's words. I was amazed and so happy and excited to find something, and then to find you were looking for information about his life after the RAF, and I was looking for his life before. Myself and her communicated for several weeks, trying to understand the two perspectives, and that's how we pieced together her dad's story. She's told me that he was a lift man, and I understand that's what we would refer to as a person who operated an elevator in a government building. So he was a lift man in a public building in Scotland. One of his favorite pastimes was sailing with his friends with a catamaran and enjoy reading the newspaper, books and that at the local park. And here we see him at the park. Unfortunately, he suffered from malaria that he had contracted while in Ceylon. And he passed away in 1966 from a blood clot. And you remember that all I had a couple years ago was a name. Nothing. Didn't know anything. So we now know about him. Now, the next person I'm going to speak about is Leander Drive, or as I often call him, Uncle Leander. Did I tell it? Did I give it some water? Not only my diabetes, but also born in 1915 and raised by his grandparents, William and Mallet Drive. It's grateful I have a big class. I'm thinking maybe I should give a quiz at the end. And reward a cold plate.
No quizzes, everybody's waiting on food.
He was working at Goldwaters in Corner Brook when he enlisted with the Newfoundland Overseas Forestry Unit. And his family, Ken in particular, myself, we learned about this, and he said he wasn't necessarily aware of it, but his name appeared in the Western Star, so I know he went over with the Forestry Unit. And you can see his name there, I underlined it in yellow, proving that he was over there on the West Coast at the time he enlisted. He was part of the second contingent to sail from Halifax. So what he had to do was take a train from Corner Brook, cross the ferry, take another train from Halifax, and they boarded, again, the same ship, but this time out of Halifax. Quoted in the packet. I always enjoyed reading it, and I still got copies of Uncle Leander's articles in the packet. In the forestry, my job was putting up cookhouses and placing utensils for cooks in the camp in Scotland and west of England. So we learned what he did with the forestry at the time. When his 6-month contract expired, he traveled to Edinburgh, hoping to join the Royal Navy. That's really what he wanted to do. But they were not accepting any new recruits at the time. So he did not get his initial wish. He traveled into England and enlisted with the Royal Air Force and was soon flying over Italy, France, and the Middle East as a gunner. There's Uncle Leander decked out in his Royal Air Force. I took the photograph and just colored it, just to give some variance to it. And you can see a very proud young man of what he was doing in England at the time. Leander met his future wife, Catherine, or as I refer to as Aunt Kitty, born in Bootheel, England. She was the daughter of John and Mary Ellen Fieldhouse. Aunt Kitty enlisted with the Auxiliary Territorial Service as a cook, and here's a photograph of both. Leander stayed in England after the war. They were married in 1946, stayed until August of that year. This is a photograph of their marriage, and I often say whenever I look at that photograph, I can see the daughter who's sitting here today with Winnie, Mom. The ship's manifest for the SS Aquitania reports that Uncle Leander and Aunt Kitty as passengers sailing back from Southampton in 1946. In 1947, Leander became a lifetime member of the Great War Association. They became active members of the Royal Canadian Legion, Leander serving as a member of the executive and chaplain. Leander explained that during an interview in 2002 with the packet, "It's hard for me to talk about it. It was a bit too tough." And here he is playing the reed at, and I believe it's the Cincinnati Carnival, I'm not sure. Now, the next two people I speak about They weren't with the Newfoundland Overseas Forestry Unit. They went forward, they joined directly with the RAF there in Newfoundland and joined in other parts of Canada where they were trained too. Son of William Thomas and Elizabeth Robbins, born 1921 in Atchito, enlisted with the 14th draft of the Royal Air Force aircraft crew in May 1941. There's a photograph of him dressed out in his uniform. This is proof that he was with the 14th draft, because his name was in the newspaper at the time. And this is another photograph. Now, unfortunately, the family, because I had to track them down, some of them were in BC, some in Ottawa, they said that they don't really know much about what he actually did in the Air Force and so on. He was single, and the family said, we just don't know, can't help it. But they did provide a couple of photographs. Remained single, very little is known about his military career. Now, this gentleman, his brother, I speak proudly of this man because I realize he was one of the only pilots from Southwest Army. He trained as a pilot. Born in Atchito, 1919. Enlisted in 1942, a year after his brother. And again, there's the article proving that he did enlist around that time. His son, Keith, in Ottawa, sent me this last week. Very proud, he said, that when he got his wings, when he became a pilot. And he became a pilot on March 1944. Now, this is some quotes from Keith in emails that we corresponded with. He said, I'm sending an image of a Mosquito aircraft, the type that my dad flew. This is what a Mosquito looked like. Now remember the Spitfire, she only had one engine. This one was twin engine. Now, quite interesting to research this plane. She was wooden. It was a wooden plane. Very light and extremely fast. The Germans couldn't catch her, type of thing. So she could quickly go in, raid German villages, and get out of there. She was a multi-role combat aircraft compared to the Spitfire. The Mosquito was one of the fastest aircraft at the time and would have been quite a challenge to fly. And Keats commented that it was quite a challenging trip given the rudimentary navigation aids that were available because his dad had to take that plane to India. And apparently his dad was quite nervous because he didn't know how the wood was going to react when he got into the different climate. So he said his dad often talked about it. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, you know. But of course it was well built. The builder of this plane was called the Diablon, and when he proposed it to the British government told him, you haven't got a clue. That's a crazy idea that you're talking about. So he went ahead and built it on his own, tested it out, and all of a sudden it became one of the fastest planes that the British had at the time. And here's a picture of Wilbur John Robbins, sent back to his girlfriend or his wife at the time when he was in India. He also said to me, you know, it was quite something for, you know, just a young lad, trained as a pilot, taken over to India and that. And he was from Atchito, a little tiny fishing town. The pride of the family with these various men who served. Now, I want to comment, Elaine already did this, but the names that are added to the monument, and you can see here at the bottom the names of the people that were added. Arthur Awood Baker, Roland Churchill, Everett King, Norman Cram, Wilson Price. Start with Arthur Baker. This is a little bit of information whose parents were, William Baker and Annie Jacobs. There was a mistake in one of the items that I found with the enlistment date. It should have read 1943, but it said 1944, because the newspaper article says he joined up in 43. And his name is circled there for you. Also, we know he enlisted, and by the way, I should mention there, because some of the Bakers are here today, that they didn't realize. I visited with Rick Baker, and Rick, does that make that sense? But we didn't know. And that's often the story with some of these things. They didn't talk about it. Okay, and it was very difficult to locate. And there's the newspaper article backing this up. And by the way, before we put a name on that monument out there, we have to find proof that that person was enlisted. So we don't want to put names here of those that did not enlist. Here's another newspaper article telling us when he was demobilized. And here's a photograph just before he died. And I understood afterwards that he moved to Grand Falls. And I didn't know that. It's easier to track down a person in Grand Falls than Ottawa, BC, and so on. Now, speaking about Everett King, and I want to recognize that Everett King's son is here today. We did not know about Everett when we initially did the monument out there, but as we collected more and more evidence, he was definitely enlisted with the Newfoundland Regiment. He was demobilized according to this article there in 1945. Now, Everett didn't stop there. He went on to serve with the Canadian Armed Forces after the Second World War, and here he is in uniform. He enlisted with the Canadian Armed Forces, served in the Korean War. That's where a lot of his service was completed. Here he is, decked out in his medals and with the Legion coat on. And, you know, when I see that, it strikes me that, gee, I missed these names. And it really bothers me that we didn't get at the beginning. Now, the medals themselves, I won't go through them all, but you can see on the right, or your right, these medals that he got for the Second World War. Then he got the United Nations Service Medal for the Korean, the Canadian Volunteer Service Medal for Korea, and so on. And all of these on the opposite side were because of the Korean conflict of the Korean War. Norman Cramp had a difficult time, still having a difficult time finding anything on it. It said that he volunteered for the Royal Air Force, but that's not correct, with Royal Artillery that he enlisted in. This proves that he was from Atchison, and he was listed in the 1921 census as the grandson. Now, I want to say this, and in all seriousness, in researching this stuff, what really bothers me is when I see, and I look around here with people with their medals. When I go online and you find reference to an auctioning off these medals. And this bothered me because when I saw this, this was in an auction. Someone bought this gentleman's medal. And to zoom in closer to that medal, it was in Palestine that he got this medal. But someone bought it. It's now in probably private collection. But that's all I know about it. Couldn't find anything. Wilson Price, I got a comment because just after we had all the names engraved, I went to the room, came across this photograph. First thing it said, Wilson Price, Hillview. And yet, knew nothing about it. That photograph and that one there proved that he was in it. He was from Hillview. Tracked down his daughter in Grand Falls, and she said, yes, definitely, Dad was enlisted in the Second World War. There's his name on a nominal roll. And he's got number that he was given for the artillery. This is the documentation proving when he came back, the ship that he was on. Now, this photograph, I just want you to look at this one for a second. His daughter sent me this one, and I don't know how many people realize the importance of this photograph, but these three men were sent over to represent Newfoundland during the coronation of the Queen. So Wilson Price was one of three representatives invited to that. And here he is right here, where he was met. If I could have your attention, because I want to say this one in all seriousness. This is my last one. I want to leave you with this message given by Uncle Leander in a packet. And someone said to me once, were you in the military? I said, no. Well, what drives you? Well, I said, stories. Stories like Uncle Leander's. Stories like Andrew Shaw was a prisoner of war. I grew up in a small community, didn't even know it. You know, so I said to my wife, you know, I got to write these stories. And she said to me, she said, that's a big job. And right now, I guess we're well up towards 300 people and still working on it. But it's important from my perspective of documenting the story. Here's the end of the word. Just look at how simple that message is. I hope they'll try to remember us. That's all we really want. Just remember. And folks, that's why you're all here today, to remember these names. Thank you very much.